Hi, everybody. Welcome to my podcast. Today, I want to talk about anxious children. People don't really talk about this, they don't realize how much anxiety many children do have, and I think it's kind of unrecognized in our society. We just think children are children, they're just running around playing and they're fine. But I think anxiety is quite rife down here, and I think a lot of children actually suffer from anxiety. And I'm talking about kids from very young age right up to their teenage years. Why it's important to understand it is because your child will act differently, and you won't often realize it's coming from the anxiety. One of the smartest things to do is to look at your family and look at who's in your family and look at who are the anxious people. Now, some of those people might be undiagnosed too, but I would say that either mum or dad or someone in your family has anxiety, or maybe several people have anxiety, and therefore it's a genetic predisposition possibly in your family. So if you're an anxious person, anxious mum or dad, and you have children, I think you should have to look at your kids and figure out whether some of them have anxiety. Now, anxiety can show up in different ways. Some people can get fatigued, you can lack concentration, you can't concentrate, and that could be something you might want to look at if you've got a child at school who has trouble at school because they can't concentrate. Some children sort of have thoughts that are racing around and they can't settle themselves, and you can hear in their voice gets higher and their speech gets more quick, and that often is the anxiety coming up. They'll also sometimes have trouble sleeping if you've got a bad sleeper. It might be that that particular child is actually suffering from quite severe anxiety because they can't sleep properly. And sometimes they're irritable. They'll be irritable and snappy and seem to be like fearful. Other children will get nausea, so they might complain of stomach aches or got a sore tummy, and sometimes that's coming from the anxiety, because if you've ever had anxiety, you know that it hits you just there in the solar plexus. Like when you're nervous or you're anxious, you can feel it as you're bubbling around where your stomach is. Some kids will tremble or kind of say that their heart's going too fast. And then they also can have things like quite obvious things that they're having, like panicking, or they're having their little panic attacks. And they might even tell you that sometimes they don't feel like they're in their body, and that's when they dissociate in the panic attack. So start listening to what your children are saying to you and decide if you think you do have one or more children who are actually suffering from different forms or degrees of anxiety. The reason it's very important to understand this is once we understand we have an anxious child, there's quite a lot we can do about it. And that's the thing. But you have to recognize it first. I think now you've listened to the podcast, you might start looking around and you might see it. And your child might actually have social anxiety, which is where you have trouble going to a party or coming out of a room. If there's a lot of people, you don't want to come out. We don't want to like have any attention, walk in front of the crowd, or be put in the limelight, and you'll get like anxious about it, or you have to stand up and read something in front of the class. These are all the signs of anxiety, and I think that if you look at your children and start to realize this, you can start to actually help them. So the first thing you might want to do is, if you think you have an anxious child, you could visit your doctor. There are also natural remedies that you can use to quell the anxiety, and you can Google that. And a lot of people use rescue remedy too with children. If you don't want to give it to them orally and just rub it on their wrists. The thing is too is to keep them in a calmer environment. It's very important if you have an anxious child not to beat up the anxiety. You don't want to like make them more anxious by getting impatient with them or yelling at them or screaming at them or agitating them to do something. You need to actually do the reverse. You need to soothe an anxious person or a child. That's what they need. They need soothing, they need reassurance, they need you to tell them that you'll get through this and they are supported. Anxiety is a horrible thing to have. If you have it, you'll know what it's like, and it can feel very alone because you've got all these weird things happening in your body and you're feeling, well, pretty crappy really. Understand that your child's not feeling good, and that's the other thing. If you can make the child feel happier, you can distract them, play some games, do some light things, go into a new environment, take them to the park, take them out for ice cream, whatever it is that you can make it so it's a happier environment. And I suppose in a funny way, it's a sort of a mindful practice to do with children, to put them in a place where they're happy. This is quite common, and I feel that the children who are coming through now, the new batches of kids that are coming through, seem to be kind of sensitive and more prone to anxiety. I'm not sure if it's because there's so much electrical gadgets around us, or whether the life is a faster pace. But whatever it is, I don't think our environment is as calm. So it's a good thing to create a calmer house at home. Try and minimise the screaming and the yelling. If you have to discipline your kids, do it in a quieter voice, a calmer voice. You be calm, and you'll make them more calm. You can make the house feel calm as well. You can have little spaces where they can go and be on their own when they're feeling a bit uptight. And you can buy one of those misters, and you can put lavender or chamomile, all these different oils in there, and burn the essences to help to make them feel calmer, because the essences are very powerful to calm a child. Another way to calm an anxious kid is to give them a massage. You can either give them a little massage, or you can buy one of those little massage machines and sit them down and massage their neck, and you will actually see quite visually a difference in your child. So you just put the little massager on them, or you massage their shoulders, or you massage their feet. So you want to do things to bring the anxiety level down. I think also talking to your child is good. Talk to them about how they're feeling. And if your child's old enough, you might be able to name it. You might be able to say, you sound like you're feeling a bit anxious. And I want you to tell me when you're feeling anxious, okay? So you tell me when you're feeling anxious, and then we'll both know, and then we'll try and help you with that. Because I think once they're old enough to understand what they're feeling, then they can tell you if you miss it. There are children like this. They're out there. I think if you're listening to this podcast, you probably have an anxious child. It's also very important to not frighten them. Don't use punishments or anything that will frighten them, because they will go away and have their racing thoughts and won't be able to sleep. And often children aren't sleeping well, and their parents don't know, because they put them to bed and they've fallen asleep, but they've woken up. And these are the children also who wake up with night terrors, bad dreams, and that's when they really need comfort. It's not the time to tell them to don't be ridiculous and get back to bed and there's nothing. This is the time they need a big cuddle and reassurance, and you sit with them until they go back to sleep. Because anxious people need to be calmed. That's what you're trying to do, is calm them down. And the way to do it is by giving support, giving physical touch, a medication if they need it, or if not, natural remedies, and to create calmness in them and around them. They're the two things. That's in them and then around them. I feel you can help your child a lot once you recognize it. And some children who are a little bit angry and irritable are actually anxious. They just present in a different way. They might be difficult to deal with. They might not be cooperative, but it doesn't mean they're naughty. Sometimes they're just feeling high anxiety, and they literally can't do it, or they don't want to go there because they're actually so anxious about it. And it's okay sometimes to cancel things. If your child's super anxious about going somewhere and it's not really a big deal, just cancel it, because that anxiety will set up them becoming more anxious, and maybe a pattern of social anxiety. They can grow out of this to a degree, I think, but not if the environment is a very anxious one for them. And that's the thing. If they have a very anxious environment, it's very hard for these children to actually start to feel better. And that's where you come in to try and make the environment as calm as you can. You might also find that these children are fairly up and down. One day they seem fine, and the next day, you're dealing with this quite difficult little person. But I think when you start to realise that it's anxiety, and then they get stressed because they're feeling so anxious on the inside, I think you'll deal with it better, and then we can help them. And that's what I want you to do. I want you to look at ways to help your child. So Google all around it and find out all about it, and look at all the things that you can do in modalities and also the different remedies that are available, and start actually doing something about your child's anxiety. And I think your life will be better, but more importantly, their life will be better. And that is really important, that your children are happy and feel calm and feel relaxed. There's probably a predisposition to anxiety in different families. I really believe that, because it seems to run down the genetic line. But that doesn't mean we can't help it. That doesn't mean we can't do things to minimize it and make everyone's life a lot better. And the thing is that if you actually suffer from anxiety, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So how you feel with your terrible anxiety is how they feel. And if it's undiagnosed or unrecognized, we can't do anything. But once we start to see it, then we can fix it, or actually give help and alleviate it. So I'm wishing you well to help your child with this anxiety, and start seeing it and start helping them. And I'm sending everyone in your family lots of love and healing, and I hope it's a calm week for everyone.